Hello, my name is Brad Muniz. I'd like to welcome you to Sobel Insights. Sobel Insights is a weekly series we provide some brief information on various topics. Our goal is to keep these sessions to 15 minutes. At this time, we do not offer CPE. If you have any ideas for topics or presenters, please feel free to email me. Our topic today is correct worker classification, and our presenter is Kelly Mayer, who's a tax supervisor at Sobel & Company. So Kelly, I know that this is an area that's always discussed, and people coming up to me and saying, you know, should I be 1099 or W-2, contractor or employee? Can you tell us, or tell the viewers, what is the difference between employee and an independent contractor?
Sure, Brad, I just want to say before I dive into that, thank you for inviting me and having me here. Hopefully we can provide some insight. So the difference is actually very complex. It seems like a basic thing on the surface. I think as soon as you start digging in, you can see that it is pretty complicated. And what it really lies in is a set of facts and circumstances that's really based on the relationship you have between the employer and the worker who's being hired. So an employee is someone who the employer has the right to direct. A lot of this lies in control. So who is controlling the means by which the work is performed, or what work will be done, how it will be done? These are sort of specifics that dictate what classification is correct. So for example, if I'm an employee of Sobel, which I am, I work for Sobel, I receive a salary. It's reported to me on a form W-2, but really at the end of the day, Sobel controls what clients I work on, tells me, you know, which projects to do, and there's a certain set of procedures I'm given. I'm provided the tools to do my job, the software that they want me to use. They set the hours they want me to work, and you know, that's a determination between the employer and the employee coming on. But at the end of the day, I use their software, they provide me the training, and I do the work the way they are directing me to do it. If I were an independent contractor, I could prepare tax returns, go out, get my own office. I could hire someone else to prepare the return. I could get my own software, my own computer, set my own hours, and be self-employed. Really, I'm then the one controlling the work, and the only thing that's controlled by the hirer or the employer is the end result. I give you a tax return by a specified date, but they don't give me any procedures or rules about how they want work papers. So really, I'm controlling the process and I'm controlling the job.
Great. And I know that there is not a test, I always call it a test, but there's a 20 factors, I believe, that the IRS, I thought it was 21, but I think it's 20 factors that the IRS came out with on this.
Yes, and this is all based in common law, but there are 20 factors that the IRS puts out there for an employer to review and sort of go through each test one by one when it comes to a worker that's being hired or a service that's being provided, so that you can test each thing and see where you're falling. I think the danger lies when you have too many tests that maybe aren't being met, but some are, and you still sort of shift to classifying a worker one direction or the other. Usually the issue here is that an employer classifies a worker who's actually an employee as an independent contractor.
Right. I Googled it at one time recently because I had nothing better to do and I didn't feel like looking up A&A. And Luz Maria hates when I go into that tax area, so I like to do it. And I looked and I couldn't find that on the IRS site particularly, but I did find it in Oregon and I think Michigan's government website. So if anybody's viewing and wants to look it up, just Google the IRS 20-factor test for independent contractor. I mean, the first few of them are fairly obvious. You stated them. It comes down to control and direction and tools. Some of them can get esoteric. When you get to 20, you've got to get a little esoteric, but it's definitely it's out there for you, and anybody who is in the situation of an employee of a company or the worker should look at this test and determine. What are some of the advantages or disadvantages to each classification?
So from a tax perspective, as an employee, I receive a Form W-2. So the taxes are already directly withheld from my pay. The Social Security and Medicare and whatever the set federal or state tax withholdings, they're already paid through, and it comes out directly through salary. Additionally, not in every situation, but as an employee, you could be eligible for the employer benefits. So if there's paid time off or pension, disability, health insurance, these are all benefits that you could be eligible for as an employee, but they're not paid for and covered for you when you are an independent contractor. Another advantage could be that it's a more long-term position. You're signing on as an employee, and so long as the relationship is good between you and the employer, and nothing changes with the entity, it can continue a long time. Sometimes independent contractor relationships are more temporary or contract-based or short-term. As an independent contractor, there are benefits as well, though, because if you're truly an independent contractor, you can deduct your business expenses, your legitimate expenses. You can deduct self-employed health insurance premiums you pay for yourself. You could make significant contributions to your own qualified retirement plan, or you may be eligible for a qualified business income deduction, possibly. You could take the home office deduction, which employees of a company are no longer allowed to take. A lot of times it comes down to just more flexibility and freedom of being self-employed and being your own boss. And another great option is then you can take on multiple contracts. If you want to work for multiple different jobs and your time allows it, you're certainly welcome to take on as many contracts as you can handle, depending on the size of the projects and what you want to. Typical full-time employees tend to work for one employer, and that's their only job. So it does come down to values of what you're really looking for in your employment.
Sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
Sorry, I want just to highlight some of the disadvantages
Okay,
though, of being an independent contractor is you don't get W-2. At the end of the year, you receive a Form 1099 NEC, which is your total earnings, but doesn't have any taxes withheld.
Right.
So you're required to keep track of all your income throughout the year, pay your quarterly estimates. And then when you file your personal tax return, you have to pay your self-employment tax, and you have to pay it at the rate of the employer and employee side, which is double what comes out as an employee. So it's at 15.3%. So you get a little bit hit on your return filing. Plus, having your own business, there's liability involved potentially. You could incur expenses to set up your business. There's cash flow issues. Then you're required to track your expenses separately from all your personal expenses. So there could be a lot involved with becoming an independent contractor. I think for employers, though, it sometimes looks attractive for the money that they can save. If they classify someone as an independent contractor, they don't have to provide medical insurance or pay retirement benefits. So, or the payroll tax side of it again. So it can seem like a savings, but while that may seem attractive on the outside, if it's incorrect, it could be very, very costly down the road.
It's funny you say that, because that was my next question. What are the penalties, for an employer misclassifying a worker, and what relief is available, if there is any?
So there's adverse effects for both sides on this. I think the biggest issue for the employer is the back taxes, the liability for the back payroll taxes. And then you add to that the interest and penalties on those tax amounts. But it could be more than that. It could be, court litigation fees potentially, if this goes to tax court or something. If it's fraudulent, potential criminal sanctions, or maybe an invalidation of an employee benefit plan. It could cause a lot of problems for an employer. If you had a situation where a worker was classified as an independent contractor, and then maybe they felt at some point they were caused, undue harm by that relationship and that they were actually an employee, and they take that to the IRS and they ask to be reclassified, they could be asking for settlements such as additional overtime pay, if they were, exceeded hourly standard work weeks, or petition for retirement benefits, unemployment, all these things that they would have had if they had been employees. So it can become very, very expensive if it's incorrect. But the good news, which you did ask about, is the relief that is potentially available. There's something called Section 530, and it's a relief provision that can provide businesses with relief from these back payroll liabilities for an incorrectly classified worker. But you do have to meet a couple of different tests in order to qualify. So if you don't mind and we have the time, I'll just mention these three tests. So the first one is reporting consistency. So if you're an employer and you're going to say that the worker you hired was truly an independent contractor, you need to have been in compliance and filed the requisite information returns, which is the 1099 that we mentioned earlier. You need to have filed that and shown that that's how you were consistently treating that worker, was as a non-employee, and giving them Form 1099 NEC. Additionally, there's a test called substantive consistency. And what that test is, that the IRS will look at that employee that's being reclassified potentially, and any other worker in the business that's doing that same job function. So if you had two people doing the same job and one's classified as an employee and one's an independent contractor, that's a red flag, and that's going to be a problem. You need to be consistent with how you're treating all the workers across the board as far as the same job function, and the IRS will look at that. If you meet both of those two tests, we move on to a third test called reasonable basis. And then it's looking, did the employer in good faith have a reasonable basis for why they chose the determination that they did? Did they follow a judicial precedent or an industry standard for their type of entity? Did they rely on advice from an accountant who advised them, or an attorney? Did they have some, solid reasoning behind why they classified the worker the way they did? If they can meet those tests, there is the possibility that they can be relieved from the penalties.
Interesting. So it's funny, over the years, I've seen some larger companies, even in New Jersey, let go of people and then rehire them as contractors. And I was always wondering how they could do that. And I'm not asking you a question on that for your judgment on that, but I was always amazed that they could do that. And it leads me into, things have changed lately, the whole COVID thing going on and the way it's going. I mean, has there been this changing environment of the past several years affected the worker classification, you think?
I definitely think that. I think that if we go back even farther than COVID, I think just the changes in the digital world and the technology that's become available over the past 5-10 years with apps, things like Uber and different delivery services like DoorDash, Grubhub. A lot of these apps and this technology offers sort of these fast, flexible work environments for people. They don't come on as employees, they come on as independent contractors. And I think that the technology has really opened up this, it's a kind of a buzzword, but the gig economy, if you will, where, we have a labor market now there's a prevalence of these short-term contracts and a lot of freelance work out there. And I think a lot of that is driven by the technology. Then, as you mentioned, COVID hits, and we are, almost 2 years into this pandemic situation. And I'm sure some of our viewers have heard of the term, the Great Resignation. You have a lot of people out there looking for more flexibility maybe, or something different, and they start their own business, and they go and take that, leap into self-employment. So I think there's, a lot happening in the world. I think that's really what muddies the waters though too, because then you have a lot of employers who come back with certain things like flex hours or full-time remote work. And it starts to make those tests, a little bit more important and difficult to determine what the actual situation is. So I think like the times are always changing. It's just really important to always be cautious, be looking at all the factors when you are making this determination ahead of time, and do your due diligence and be thorough in really determining before classifying a worker.
Great, thank you very much. And you're hitting right on the time. So you're amazing how punctual you are. But I want to thank everybody for viewing. Hopefully you got some information on this. I know that Kelly could have gone on for another half hour on this because this topic can get very deep. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to help out. But again, thank you very much for viewing. And Kelly, thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.